Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone in the franchise world. My name is Paul Segreto, and this is Franchise Today. We are in the middle of our fourth annual franchise legal series on Franchise Today. My guest today is Mark Kirsch, a partner at Gray Plant Mooty, and we'll be introducing Mark in just a little bit. I'd like to thank our guest last week, Barry Hella from DLA Piper. We talked about franchisor litigation issues. And, of course, all segments of Franchise Today and the legal series are available on demand at blogtalkradio.com/franchise today show. Next week, my guest will be Lane Fisher of Fisher Zucker, and we'll be talking about franchise or actually legal issues with emerging franchise brands. Followed up the following week with Jonathan Redgrave. We'll be talking again about e-discovery in this ever-changing digital virtual world. And then we'll wrap up the legal series, a very successful one, I might add, with Dean Heil from the IFA, who will give us our IFA Legal Symposium recap. And I'm sure we'll also be talking about some of the legal rumblings coming out of the great state of Maine. Want to let everybody know next week, Monday through Wednesday, I'll be at the IFA Fran Camp, the Digital Marketing and Technology Conference at the Lowe's in Atlanta. First of its kind event by the IFA. I'll be in one of the panels. If you haven't already done so, try to make some arrangements to get down there and join us for a couple of days. There's a tweet up Monday night. Should be really great event. Beyond that, I'll also be at the Franchise Consumer Marketing Conference in June, put on by our strategic partner of Franchise Today, the Franchise Update Media Group. That's in June. That's also in Atlanta. Actually, it's in Buckhead. It'll be at the Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead. Franchise Foundry, the producer of Franchise Today, is one of the bronze sponsors of that event. Really good time in Atlanta for both of these marketing-focused and technology-focused events. Make every attempt to attend both of them because they are both distinctly different. And, of course, the Franchise Consumer Marketing Conference, this is its third year. And then, of course, the IFE, the International Franchise Expo, in June in New York City. Hope to see you there as well. And Franchise Today, in the month of June, as I said, as we come out of our fourth annual legal series, we'll be in our franchise model series. And, of course, spending some time in legal, even though legal is a big component of the franchise model, I think 8 weeks at that point will suffice. We're going to lead in on June 6th. Ed Waller, the co-founder of CertaPro and the 2012 chairperson of the Franchise Consumer Marketing Conference, will meet my guest on June 6th as we discuss consumer marketing. And then on June 13th, this year's Bonnie Levine Award winner, Mary Thompson, president of Mr. Ruta, and of course, a component of the Dwyer Group. She'll be my guest as we talk about operations and franchise relations. Really look forward to having Mary first time on the show. And June 20th, we shift gears a little bit and talk about franchise sales and development and franchise dynamics. Robert Stidham will be my guest. And then we'll wrap up the franchise model series with Amit Pamecha of FranConnect as we discuss technology and franchising. Really should be a great event. Then this summer, as I've mentioned before, we'll go into our Franchisor Spotlight series. First time we'll be broadcasting live through the summer. It'll be about 8 or 9 weeks of franchisors talking specifically about best practices and how they have helped them achieve success in a very competitive marketplace. It'll be non-promotional. It'll all be about best practices. And then in September, we'll be focused on public affairs. We'll be talking about, we'll be kind of synced with the IFA's Public Affairs Conference. We're going to have a segment in September about franchising giving back. We'll be leading into October and November where we really put our focus in franchise sales and development, and that'll wrap around the Franchise Update Group. Leadership and Development Conference in Buckhead, Georgia, outside of Atlanta, as well as the West Coast Franchise Expo in Anaheim. And then, of course, December, we'll wrap up the year with a great year, I'm sure. We'll wrap up with a year in review. We also have planned 6 or 8 more live special events. One I know in particular will be about the Dealmaker Summit in Chicago, Illinois, with Susan Blackbeth and her team, and that will occur sometime during the summer. And we'll provide you with updates as we move along. I would like, again, to, as I like to always do, reach out to our strategic partners on Franchise Today, Fishman Public Relations, of course, the Franchise Update Media Group, and Elements Local. And as everyone knows also, these are 3 strategic partners for Fran Summit, and real excited about Fran Summit this year. We're going to be putting together a franchise social media and technology summit, which will be in September. It will be virtual, probably be about 9 to 15 hours packed of information. So definitely look forward to having you attend that. Look for more information in the upcoming weeks. You know, Mark Kirsch, today's guest, was my guest last year. We were just reminiscing a little bit before the show about him being in the middle of a deal last year and me being at the multi-unit conference and still being on Franchise Today at the same time. Mark is a principal at Gray Plant Mooty and a member of its franchise and distribution practice group. He focuses that practice on domestic and international franchising and distribution matters. He represents and counsels clients on various corporate, commercial, licensing, franchise, and business development matters across a wide range of industries, including restaurants and food service, hotels, and the hospitality industry, healthcare, equipment manufacturing and distribution, educational and training businesses, technology and communications, car rental and automotive services, employment and personnel agencies, convenience stores, real estate, publishing, cosmetics and hair care, and various retail product and service businesses. His work involves primarily transactional and regulatory matters. Mark, welcome back to Franchise Today.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you back. It was great seeing you at the IFA, and I know you're also probably a little bit tired and winded today after spending 3 days in Washington at the IFA Legal Symposium and the event afterwards, and I know you were actively involved in that. Can you kind of just give us an overview, you know, maybe some of the sentiment in the air, a little bit of the excitement, enthusiasm, or maybe trepidation? I'll let you decide.
Sure. I mean, the last 3 days, the International Franchise Association has a 2-day seminar. It's the Legal Symposium, which it's primarily for lawyers and business executives who are interested in the legal issues. And then the third day is a joint program that with the IFA and the International Bar Association Franchise Committee, and it's primarily on international franchise topics. Both or all 3 days, or both sessions were well attended, and my sense is from talking to people, both from the IFA convention in February as well as folks the last couple of days, there is clearly an uptick in business. I think there is a sentiment that things are getting better and stronger, maybe not in a direct upward course, but better and stronger depending on industry. And from legal issues, there was one of the plenary sessions was an IFA program with Ken Walker, one of the former chairs of the IFA board, and Aziz Hashim, a large multi-unit franchisee, talking about franchise relations and some of the issues that franchisors and franchisees and the IFA are going to try to address going forward to try and improve franchise relations, so that people can focus on building their brands and building individual businesses, and on new legislation or new regulation, which is something which, you know, no matter what side of the fence you're on, most people don't like it. But it was a strong conference, and it was well attended.
I'm glad to hear that, and absolutely a big proponent of improving franchise relations. Aziz and Ken are both great speakers. I saw them and got a chance to listen to them a couple of times last year at various events. Two very, very smart, engaging individuals, and with a wealth of experience and a wealth of success. And, of course, as I briefly mentioned, about the rumblings going on in the state of Maine, I mean, obviously, we do need to spend even more attention on franchise relations than ever before. But, I really believe a lot of that, starts at square one when the candidate first contacts or as an interested party, because I don't believe they're a candidate at that point, when they first contact the franchise brand, to inquire about their franchise opportunity. And, of course, that kind of sets the foundation for the relationship. And I know that, and I'm a big proponent of having this smooth transition through the franchise sale and then to startup, because to me there becomes this big gap between the time they pay their franchise fee and they sign their franchise agreement and to the time that they actually go through their grand opening of their business, depending on whether it's bricks and mortar or not, and how complex it is to, build a building, find a location, the whole 9 yards. I mean, it can be quite a big period of time, and it seems to always be a lull during that time period. And I've been a big proponent of, keeping that communications going so that a franchisee, a new franchisee at that point, doesn't come away with the feeling that, oh, my God, they spent so much time with me. I paid my money, I signed the agreement, and now everybody's radio silent. And obviously there's some reasons for that, because there are different things that are being done that might not directly involve the franchisee at that point. But, of course, it's still important. I mean, it would be like, getting married and then taking off for, a year and a half without any communications. Probably wouldn't have a wife when you got back or a husband when you got back. But anyway, nevertheless, and I think it even complicates it when, of course, we have a third-party outsourced individual or firm handling the franchise sale. And, of course, that's the topic today, franchise sales outsourcing opportunities and pitfalls, plus, of course, digital issues relating to it, of course, as the digital age continues to evolve. So it should be an interesting topic today, Mark. So let's start at the beginning. What do we mean by franchise sales outsourcing from a legal perspective?
Okay. Yeah, you're right. It's a good place to start at the beginning, and one of the issues you just mentioned is setting the stage and setting the expectations for prospective franchisees, and then delivering on those expectations all the way through the process, not just the sales process, but the training, the pre-opening, the opening, and obviously, hopefully, a successful 10, 20-year term. But franchise sales outsourcing is one way to look at it is, what do you need to do to sell a franchise? Any franchisor, you just don't put a website up, you just don't have an FDD. You got to get out there and you got to promote your brand. And there's really two ways to do it. You can have someone in-house, an employee, an officer, director, or you can have someone outside. And at franchise sales outsourcing is the idea of using some third party that is not a regular member of your team to sell franchises, to be your franchise development person. And that's a term that a lot of people use, franchise development, franchise sales. It's selling and promoting the franchise. There's another term that people use, and that's franchise broker. All of these are somewhat interchangeable. And the idea is that instead of having an in-house franchise sales person or department or staff, you're going to hire an independent contractor. And that independent contractor or broker could be one individual. It could be a group of individuals working together. It could be large regional or national networks. And so all of these are different ways to proceed with outsourcing. And just let me kind of lay or set the table, if you will. There are, as I mentioned, you could hire one person who's your salesperson, be in-house staff. Or you could have someone who is just a business broker, and he or she will be promoting your business. Or you could go to a company that does this on a regular basis for franchise companies. They may have 2 or 3 or 6 people. Or you could have a large development group. Or you could have a vast referral network. And each one of these groups or individuals do things differently. There's another topic, we may get to it later today, is an area representative or an area developer. This is someone who actually has a contract to develop franchises and as well sell franchises. But we can kind of put that to the back burner for now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, there obviously we deal with registration states. There's certain requirements regarding identifying franchise sellers, and yet there continues to be this, and I'm going to put quotes around this, and I hate doing that whole quote thing. I kind of feel like George Carlin when I do that, when how much he hated that too. But the quote thing of confusion, because I really don't think it's confusion as much as some people try to look at it as a little bit of sleight of hand. And back in September, and I'm going to read this, it's just a quick paragraph, and it was an article I wrote about are you a franchise seller, because it stemmed from just these ridiculous discussions going on in LinkedIn. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this and what goes on in sites like LinkedIn is that there are a lot of impressionable, young startup franchisors that are hanging everything on every word that's out there. So I definitely caution people that contribute regularly on LinkedIn. Make sure the information you're putting out there is accurate, because there are people that are running with them. Of course, the responsibility lies on them to make sure the information is accurate. But still, just keep that in mind, because we want to protect franchising as a whole. And I said on the surface, it doesn't appear to be too difficult to determine whether or not one is a franchise seller. Yet I hear time and time again the same rationalization and justification as to why a person feels they are not a franchise seller. I hear about trading off the candidate prior to the sale, only qualifying the candidate until the franchise salesperson actually talks turkey with the candidate. And just recently I was told about presenting the candidate with 3 options, but the candidate has not sold anything. Does anyone ever, really believe this crap? And so, let's get down to, the lay of the land. At what point is a person a franchise seller and has to represent themselves as a franchise seller?
Well, you're absolutely right. There is confusion, and part of the confusion comes from the word franchise seller, which is a term that's in the Federal Trade Commission's franchise rule, or the FTC rule. And a franchise seller is any person that is involved in the promotion or sale of a franchise business and receives compensation for that. So what does that mean? Well, they don't really describe it. And over the years, the FTC has tried to modify it, explain it, etc. And I'll give you an interesting story. At a conference, it was one of the IFA legal symposiums a couple of years ago. Someone from the FTC was there, and they tried to explain that. And someone said, well, okay, I get it. A franchise prospect flies into town for a discovery day, and they get picked up at the airport by one of the junior staff people at the franchisor's office, picks up the prospect, and he drives him to the Discovery Day meeting. And they have a conversation about the franchise business and who the brand is, et cetera. All right, and then the prospect gets off and comes to a meeting and meets with the advertising director and the franchise sales director and the training director and maybe someone at R&D, et cetera. And the FTC regulators said, well, all of those people are franchise sellers. And, of course, most of us in the room just laugh, because you're not going to identify all those people as franchise sellers in the FDD. So it's a matter, but technically, yes, all those are franchise sellers. But what we're really talking about and really what's important are the people who are actively promoting the sale of the franchise. And so some of these issues come down to, not the kid who's driving the car, but
Sure.
it's these broker networks that we're talking about. Because, and I want to kind of expand on what I was talking about earlier, what the broker or a broker network or an outsourced sales, what they do. All of those companies or individuals are franchise sellers, but they may do different things. And I'll go through what they are. What's most important is not knowing today what they do or may not do, but if you're a franchisor, understanding what it is you want them to do and how they will help your brand and how they will help not just selling a franchise, but promoting your brand and getting the right message out. So you have these broker networks that do what also the lowest level, and I mean that the least amount of work, is all they are is providing referrals and leads. They, through their own network, whether it's through their own websites or through their own portals or through other contacts, they find individuals who might be interested in brand X or brand Y or brand Z, and then they do some very minor vetting, and then they turn those leads over to the franchisor, and the franchisor's internal staff, development staff, then picks up the ball and runs with it, being that the prospect, and doing more analysis, more evaluation, more selling, if you will. That's the least amount of activity. Then you could have a similar network or group of brokers that has both referrals and leads, and really the franchise sales process, may even deliver the FDD, may do some promotion, may do some more advertising, and then later in the process, if you will, hands off the ball to the franchisor. Then there are brokers or broker networks who are involved in the entire sales process, from finding the lead, vetting them, selling the business or the opportunity, not actually signing the contract. That eventually, at some point, the franchisor does that. And then getting involved in the post-sale, that is the pre-opening, maybe some training, maybe some site selection, maybe some real estate assistance. There's yet another level, and that is brokers who are really more on the line of outsourced consultants. They do all of that sales, the referrals, the leads, the vetting, the sale, the post-sale assistance, and ongoing assistance, okay? And then, at that point, you've outsourced your entire that is you, the franchisor, has outsourced the entire franchise sales and development process. And there are different companies that do different things. They have different strengths, and you as a franchisor need to know what works best for you. Let me just flip it around. As a prospect, you need to know who you're dealing with. Are you dealing with someone who is in-house at the company, or is it someone who's just trying to find out, well, you're interested in food service, or you have this amount of net worth, and therefore this opportunity may be better for you instead of that opportunity. So it's important to know the role from both sides. But actually, to get back to your question, Paul, all of these people are franchise sellers. And in the regulatory world nowadays, the most important part is that those franchise sellers just have to be identified on the last page of the FDD on the receipt page. And in certain registration states, there are certain forms that need to be filed. None of this is too burdensome, but it's just part of the process.
I think the key word here through it all, maybe making the distinction, is where the compensation, the commission trail meanders its way through. I'm of the mindset, you're definitely a franchise seller if you're getting some type of compensation as a result of the franchise sale.
That's correct. I don't think anyone does this just for kicks. They are doing it for money. If you're an employee franchise salesperson or development person, that's part of your annual compensation. Most of these franchise brokers are compensated on some sort of commission basis. Generally speaking, they will get a fixed amount or a percentage of the franchise sale. So if the franchise sale is for $40,000, they may get 10, they may get 20, they may get X percent. That's how most of them are paid. There are some franchise brokers that will negotiate an upfront fee to do this, to get involved, as well as a percentage or a fixed amount based on each franchise sale. And some of them also negotiate to get a piece of the royalty, the ongoing royalty, assuming most franchise businesses have some sort of royalty, say an ongoing royalty of 5%. There are some brokers or broker networks that say, well, I'll take a smaller piece of each sale we close, but I would like 1% of all royalties from the franchises that I sell going forward, or some number like that. Those are very lucrative deals for the franchise broker. From the franchisor, that's a very significant piece of your ongoing revenue. So you got to make sure you're going to, from the franchisor's perspective, they need to make sure that it makes sense financially and operationally to do that.
Sure, they have to evaluate what they're getting in return as well. So there are individuals, and again, I'll refer back to LinkedIn, that have stated that, I am not a franchise seller, even though I'm getting a percentage of the franchise fee, but I feel I am not a franchise seller because I'm not the one delivering the FDD. What are your thoughts on that?
Delivering the FDD is not the determinative factor, and I've heard that, and that's just not accurate. It is if you're involved in the franchise sales process, promoting the brand. Now, there are probably situations where someone is delivering an FDD and is not in the franchise sales process. For example, if one of my clients called me and said, well, we got a prospect in such and such a location, could you send him or her a copy of the FDD? I could certainly do that. That wouldn't make me a franchise seller. It's really enticing or promoting or getting someone interested in purchasing the franchise. I think there is a level of franchise brokers that are primarily referrals. They do very, very little in terms of promoting the brand. They have their own database, or they collect information, and they may represent multiple brands. And they find someone and they say, well, you may want to consider brand X. And here's the FDD, and if you're interested, call Mr. Smith. And then Mr. Smith is the in-house development vice president for brand X. Arguably, that person who did that referral is not really a franchise broker. He or she may get compensated if the prospect actually signs a franchise with brand X, and brand X pays this person some fee. Yeah, arguably, but that's about as close as I would get to say it's probably not a franchise seller.
Right, it's probably more of a lead generator. It's just another marketing source.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just say, in terms of a lead generation, you could, there are web portals and other websites that are lead generation, and if something comes through that, the franchisor pays the website. Well, the website's not a franchise seller. So what we're talking about here is this gray area between a nondescript website and someone who is functioning with just a little bit more involvement.
Absolutely, I agree, and I appreciate you clarifying that. So, one of the things that I've heard said also in the same light and certainly in the same spirit is that I've heard individuals say, well, if I'm not the one presenting the FDD, therefore I'm not a franchise seller, and I can't be held liable for any type of improper disclosure. What would be your thoughts on that?
My thought would be that person ought to rethink that sort of conclusion, because I can see, and I've seen situations where a broker is heavily involved in the franchise promotion activity, meeting with prospects, putting out ads, actually running validation calls, etc. And the FDD may be delivered by the franchisor or its representative. Well, that person is clearly involved in the franchise sales process, and he or she would be liable for any sort of misstatements or misrepresentations. And I think what we ought to focus on, or what people should focus on, is not the label of franchise seller, because whether you are or not, it's, as I said, it's a matter of what you put in. The FDD is not a big deal. You're listed in the FDD's receipt page. But what's more important is what are the activities of the broker or the seller, and then what are he or she doing, and that's what could get you into trouble. Hopefully not, but that's what makes the sale. I mean, if someone who's going to be doing this, and the more a person is involved in that process and actively trying to promote, then the more likely they could either run afoul of the law, but the more likely they're going to have a bigger cut of the compensation. So they should be concerned about it.
Absolutely. This past Monday, I had the pleasure and the honor of doing a training session for the Franchise Brokers Association, and it was franchise sales best practices, do's, don'ts, and more. And we discussed a lot of this specifically to these young brokers getting involved in the business, and it was amazing how many questions were coming out of it. One of the things I always like to do, Warren Lee Lewis, definitely a friend of the Franchise Today show, and would have been on for the fourth consecutive year, if not for a personal issue that had come up with a family member. But anyway, Warren is the author of the Franchise Seller's Handbook, and I highly recommend picking this up if you have anything to do with franchise sales. And it opens up with Introduction Making Legal Franchise Sales. Then there's a definition right on page 1 of a franchise seller. It's about as clear-cut a definition as I've seen. If you do not have access to the book, let me know. I'll be more than happy to send you a link to the PDF, or just Google search Franchise Seller's Handbook, Warren Lee Lewis, and I believe it's the top search result. We're Franchise Today. We're live in the middle of our 4th annual legal series. My guest today is Mark Kirsch, the principal at Gray Plant Mooty. And Mark and I are discussing outsourcing of franchise sales with a look at various opportunities and pitfalls that may be counted along the way. The discussion has been moving on from franchise brokers. We'll be talking now about legal requirements and digital issues, and, of course, many points in between. You know, Mark, representing many franchisors as you do, how does a franchisor ensure that the broker will represent the brand well? And, of course, there is that legal question that hangs over it as well, you know, making sure that they represent them well, not only from a marketing standpoint and presentation standpoint, but from a legal standpoint as well.
Okay. Well, when a franchisor looks for a broker, they're doing it, or looks to outsource sales, they're doing that as a means to reduce some of their cost, or at least their overhead, instead of having an in-house staff person that they're paying every day, month, and year. They're going to get an outsourced sales person or group, which they only pay when there has been a sale. So that's great. You're pushing your cost off. But a franchisor has to treat that process and those people the same way as if they're treating someone they're going to hire in-house. They want to have the best person or people they can find who will represent their brand the best possible, and who understands the mission and the policies of the brand, as well as just kind of the personality of the brand. And so first and foremost, you really have to interview and vet your brokers and their broker networks and understand who they are, what their experience is, and what they're going to do. The second piece, and before we get to the legal issues, is you want to try to get an exclusive with this broker. Now, it wouldn't be the only company they'll work with, but you try to get an exclusive with them, possibly as to the region, or more likely as to the industry. So the broker will only represent one burger chain or one elder care franchise or one pizza chain or whatever, so that when they get leads, they can evaluate those leads and say, well, this person probably is not good for food service or is not interested in food service, but he or she may be interested in a service business. And so you have a broker that is committed to your brand and your industry. Once you get that, there are forms you need to send out. If these brokers are going to be franchise sellers, as we talked about, they have to be registered in certain states as either a broker or a franchise seller, and they're forms that you as the franchisor must submit. And so you get these forms. They talk about bankruptcy history, litigation history, employment history. Get those forms and read them, and don't just get them and put them in a file, but understand what the experience of these people are, if there are any problems out there, and any red flags. Next thing is, once you have these brokers, train them on your system. Again, the same way as if they were your employee and you want them to understand everything, soup to nuts, about what makes your system and your brand better than the next one. Excuse me. Train them on your system. That's so they understand the culture and why selling your brand is better than selling another brand, and why buying your brand is better. Next part of the training should be training them on franchise law compliance. All right, because anything that they say or do that's illegal is going to hurt the franchisor. The franchisor and its officers and directors could be liable for whatever the broker says, and vice versa. So you want to make sure, or you, the franchisor, wants to make sure that they understand what the laws are, what they can say, what they can't say, what it really means to be registered or not registered, what they can say about financial performance representations, or what was called earnings claims, whether they can place ads themselves. All of those things are legal compliance issues that the franchisor must comply with itself, with its people, make sure the broker is trained. And I'm not sure there's a last issue, but you want to make sure you have an engagement letter or a contract with them that is clear as to what they will do for you, what you will do, what they won't do, and what the compensation is, as well as having outs and indemnifications and the like. I know this is the lawyer talking, but you really want to put it in writing, because no one cares about anything as long as it's successful. They're selling franchises, the brand is doing well, and everyone's doing well. But when there's a problem, there's an investigation by a state, there's a franchisee who claims that they were told some illegal earnings claims or financial information, then everyone pulls out the contract and says, okay, well, what were we supposed to do and what were they supposed to do? So that's part of what I would call the best practices. You treat the broker the same way that you would treat hiring an individual and having him or her part of your team.
In the first segment of this year's fourth annual Franchise Legal Series, Michael Laithold from Plave Cook was my guest, and we talked about franchise sales best practices. And I shared some information I shared with him, because I don't think you've heard this from me as of yet, as we at Franchise Foundry are a complete franchise development firm and a franchisor as well, because we own several brands outright. I was talking with several CEOs of some established franchise brands, obviously trying to bring them on as clients, and all three had said, it was around the same time, and all three had said, they were satisfied where they were at, and they felt that their staff was very, very well trained and understood entirely how to sell franchises, especially from a legal standpoint as we got into conversation about the FDD and stuff. And what I shared with Michael and share now is that we, with the permission of the CEO, we tested the salespeople that were involved, and it was in all cases, it was a VP of franchise sales and franchise development, one franchise salesperson, and one broker representing their brand. And we did a 20-part multiple choice test on their specific FDD. And it wasn't about, the legal jargon or anything. We didn't ask them to, describe or give an opinion on, dispute resolution or anything like that. It was, how much is the franchise fee? Is there a discount for multiple units? What is the range of investment, et cetera, et cetera? And of the 9 tested, 8 failed based on a passing score of 70. And it was really troubling. Everybody I told it to, chuckles. I guarantee you the 3 CEOs didn't chuckle. Were very much aghast at it. And I think this is, probably, I hate to use the word trend and think that the entire franchise industry is full of people that don't understand it, but there isn't enough understanding of the FDD, of their own FDDs. The questions that were asked were stuff that could be used from a sales standpoint and have to be used from a sales standpoint. I couldn't imagine somebody not knowing, the range of investment or anything like that. But the one question, and only one question, was answered correctly uniformly across the board. And I know you know the answer to that, which is the franchise fee. They all knew their franchise fee. From there, it was a crapshoot. And the second part of it is, as we do a lot, we're big proponents of the Franchise Seller's Handbook because it is a great desktop guide, as well as a big proponent of FranGuard and all the people that we have represent us. We make sure go through are familiar with both of those. But there's so many out there that absolutely do not do that. So definitely they should heed your advice. Train your broker and your franchise salespeople on your system itself, on your FDD, and also on franchise law compliance.
Right, and let me add to that. And I know it's maybe a little bit off the franchise broker piece, but when someone someone buys a franchise and joins the franchise brand, it's not just one contract or one location. They're being part of the team, and I'm not going to use the capital P partner, but they're part of the team. Everyone at the franchisor's home office is part of the team, and so just because you're a training instructor or part of the advertising team, you really should know everything about the brand. And you're right. The person who is reviewing copy or doing something else, they don't need to know the nitty-gritty of the exclusive territory provision in Item 12 of the FDD, blah, blah, blah. But they really need to know that they need to be part of the team and be able to promote it. I think it works for everybody, and it's helpful in that process of when someone comes in, says, "Oh yeah, everyone's on the same team. They're all playing, all using the same script." And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but they're all together.
Absolutely. So, we have to get to what many call the sensational part of it, but I call it as the practical and prudent part of the conversation. Is if a broker crosses a line, the legal line, what is the potential impact on the franchisor?
Well, there's several impacts. None of them are good. All right. If a broker crosses a line, now what does that mean? All right. They promise something they're not supposed to promise. Most likely, what would happen is they would give financial information they're not supposed to give. But if they cross a line, for the broker, he or she could be liable for damages either from the franchisee or also from a state agency. The franchisor is also liable for the broker's action. And most likely the franchisor would get sued by a franchisee, or the franchisor would have to then have to answer to questions from the state agencies. And so what does all this mean? Well, there's a possibility of paying damages to the franchisee. There's a possibility of rescinding the sale, which means basically ripping up the contract and giving all the money back. There's a possibility of having a state agency come after you with an investigation and possibly having to sign a consent decree saying, our firm or our company has violated the franchise laws and we're going to give back money or pay a fine, and have to disclose this in the FDD for the next 10 years that the franchisor or its brokers have violated the law. So all of these are bad things. Now, even if it doesn't get that bad, it's a small community. And if people don't do the right thing, people talk. And if you're a broker and even if you didn't get caught doing something, or you weren't found liable, you're going to have a hard time getting the job in the next place. So it's bad news. And let me say something else. It's bad for the franchise brand, even if it was a broker, a rogue person, or someone. Not that they're a bad person. Maybe they, for the most part, they just didn't understand, or they didn't understand the rules, and they pushed the envelope more than they should have, and it caused some problems down the road. It just hurts the franchise brand and its image, and that could be as detrimental as anything else.
No doubt. No doubt it could be a crippling effect. And so from a broker's perspective, what is the broker's liability? How does it affect him or her down the road, and beyond just reputation? I mean, what are the potential legal ramifications against a broker individual?
A broker could be just as liable to a franchisee for misrepresentation as the franchisor. So if the broker violates the law, a franchisee could sue the broker. And in many cases, if there is a lawsuit involved, the franchisee will sue the broker and the franchisor, figuring I'll get my compensation from one or the other. So it's primarily damages. If there is an adverse action, that would have to be disclosed on the broker's form, and that it doesn't have to be disclosed in the FDD. But I will say this: if a broker then wants to go in-house and become a development person or a franchise salesperson for a franchisor, then as an in-house salesperson, they may have to be disclosed in the FDD, and if there's adverse litigation or penalties or fines, that would also have to be disclosed. So it may be very difficult. It's embarrassing because then it becomes a public document, and you may have a tough time getting a job.
Now, what about from a state agency's perspective? Is there the potential of them going directly after the broker?
There is. They don't usually do it unless it's egregious. But yeah, state agency when they usually don't make a distinction between at the outset who did the bad act. They look at the franchisor and they say to the franchisor, "You're responsible for the broker." If it turns out that the broker has engaged in misconduct, a state agency may go after them and may issue a fine. It's very rare, but it's usually, as I said, in egregious cases.
Yeah, so to the franchisors that think out there that, well, if the broker causes some problem, it'll be on their shoulders, not ours. Nothing could be further from the truth.
That's right.
They're coming after the franchisor without a doubt. So what are the legal compliance requirements if a franchisor retains a broker? And then let's get past this, and I want to talk about the digital world and how this all affects. So are there legal requirements, compliance requirements, if a franchisor retains a broker?
Sure, and they have been reduced over time with changes in the law. There are really two types of compliance. One is in the FDD, and one is with the franchise registration states. In the FDD, a third-party independent broker does not have to be disclosed in Item 2. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Item 2 is the list of officers and directors and management people of the franchisor. But they do have to be the brokers do have to be listed on the FDD receipt page, and as a franchise seller, as we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. And in the registration states, in some of the registration states, about 9 of them, you have to take a form, a franchise salesperson form or franchise seller form, disclose certain information about your employment history, litigation history, bankruptcy history, and submit that to the state as part of the franchisor's registration each year. And then there are 3 states, Illinois, New York, and Washington, that have separate broker forms for a separate broker registration. They treat brokers differently than employee sellers. But that's it. And you just have to register as a fee, but it's relatively minor and ministerial. It's not difficult.
Real quick question regarding the franchise broker forms in Illinois, New York, and Washington. If a broker is working for a broker organization, is the broker organization the one filling out the form, or is it the individual brokers?
It's usually the broker. It's the organization that does it.
Okay.
Assuming that the broker is an employee as opposed to a loose affiliation of independent contractors.
Got you covered.
So it's like a lot of things in law. It's not as simple as it sounds. But if you're engaging an individual, yes, he or she is required. If you're engaging the organization, they're required. And many of these broker networks, at the top level of the network, they handle a lot of those mass registrations. So it's just something, if you're a broker, to be aware of what your obligations are.
So where does area representatives, area developers, and of course a host of different names that are these area developers arrangements are being considered under, where does that fit in into the franchise sales development structure and process?
All right. I'll try to be brief on this. Area development and area representative are multi-unit development concepts. An area developer, in the traditional sense, is someone who is granted a right to develop and then operate multiple franchises in a territory. A true area developer is just a multiple unit franchisee. He or she is really not a franchise salesperson or franchise broker or franchise seller, because he or she is granted, or his or her company is granted the right and the obligation to develop multiple units. And so they're not selling to any third party. On the other hand, a term that is often used called area representative, or sometimes it will be called area developer, but called area representative or master developer. This is someone who is granted the right from the franchisor to develop and operate one or more franchise units, and then go out and be the franchise salesperson and franchise support person for that franchisor. There are a number of brands, some of them in the sandwich arena, that have used this very profitably and very successfully, where you hire someone who has a territory, he or she signs 2 or 3 franchise agreements, operates a couple of units, and then goes out and promotes the brand on behalf of the franchisor. In that case, that franchisee/area representative is also a franchise seller and must comply with the franchise sales rules and the regulations we've been talking about. It can be very successful. There is something that they need to be concerned about, and this probably goes beyond what we'd have time to talk about today, and that is the area rep, is wearing 2 hats. In one hat, he is a franchisee, and another hat, he's the franchise seller. And so when he talks to a prospect, if a prospect came to him and said, "Gee, tell me about your franchise business," that person can say anything he or she wants, can talk about sales and revenues and how much business they do and how good the franchisor is, how bad the franchisor is. That's what a prospect should do in part of their due diligence. But if that prospect is talking to this area rep, it's not clear whether the area rep is actually talking with his franchisee hat, where he's free to say those things, or he's talking with his area rep hat on, in which he is circumscribed or limited as to what he can say about earnings or revenue, et cetera, because there he's acting as a franchise salesperson. So it's an important distinction to understand.
Yeah, and you're right. We definitely don't have enough time today. As I often say, we need a bigger boat. We definitely can talk a lot further because all questions come into mind about, master franchises. I know a lot of the commercial cleaning companies and some other companies have a master franchise type of scenario where they're doing a lot of their own disclosure. So we'll leave that to another day, but definitely some questions there. So as we shift gears, and we've got, maybe about 5 minutes or so left, are franchise sales migrating to the web and or to social media? And if so, does this raise legal issues in your mind?
Well, the answer to the first part is absolutely. Franchise sales have been migrating to the web and to social media. And yes, it does raise legal issues, but let me explain how they've migrated. I mean, I would say 10, 15 years ago, franchise sales started to go through these web portals, third-party websites that would promote the franchise opportunities. You'd go on, you'd find some information, you'd click on, and it might take you to the franchisor's website, and then the franchisor's website would take over, or they might have a third-party broker to take over. Now what's happening with many more opportunities, particularly with social media platforms, there are more websites, more broker network sites, and these are starting to operate as another web channel for various brands. And then from there, you're seeing franchisors as well as brokers use certain social media. Not everyone, and not all the media platform, and I can't name them all. I mean, I probably name a small percentage, even Paul. But you don't really see franchise sales going on in Facebook. But you do see it in LinkedIn. You do see some YouTube. You do see some Twitter. And my sense is, and what I've seen with some of my clients in other situations, it's not so much for a direct sales as you're really trying to reach out and grab someone and tell them about your brand or about the brand that you're promoting. It's more for brand awareness or piquing someone's interest in a brand or getting them drawn in, and then you might turn them over, or you as a broker may end up doing more what I would call traditional franchise sales.
Sure.
But it's a great way to reach out and touch people. But you or a franchise broker and the franchisors have to understand that there are rules that are going to apply to social media and the sale of franchises. For example, the FTC has advertising and endorsement rules that apply for a wide variety of businesses and a wide variety of media, including social media. For example, you're not allowed to, you are allowed to pay someone to endorse your brand or your product. It just has to be clear that that person is being compensated. And if it's not clearly an ad or a commercial and someone wouldn't know, they need to be their compensation needs to be disclosed. So and I've seen where brokers have used social media and have paid someone to talk about the brand. Well, if you're trying to put them up there as a satisfied franchisee, A, they better be a satisfied franchisee, and B, as opposed to just a shill, and B,
right.
You have to disclose that you've paid them. Now, I'm not sure people want to do that, so you got to be careful about those sorts of things.
Absolutely, Mark. Mark, we're running out of time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, one of the things that I know we talked about is, and remind everybody, and in 2 weeks we'll talk about it with Jonathan Redgrave. What gets said or posted on the Internet stays on the Internet. Next week, my guest is Lane Fisher. Mark, I really appreciate you being here today. We could easily talk another hour or two, and I look forward to having you and other individuals from the law firm Gray Plant Mooty on in the future. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed this. I really did. Thanks a lot.
Same here. Again, next week, Lane Fisher, Fisher Zucker. Until then, my name is Paul Segreto, wishing you the best. the very best in this great thing we call franchising. Franchise Today is out.
When you're part of a military family, you understand sacrifice and support. So at American Public University, we honor your dedication by extending our military tuition savings to your extended family. Parents, spouses, legal partners, siblings, and dependents all qualify for APU's preferred military rate of just $250 per credit hour for undergraduate and master's level programs. American Public University. Value for the whole family. Learn more at apu.apus.edu/military.